Brooklyn, we go hard. We go hard. Brooklyn, we go hard. We go hard. Brooklyn, we go hard. We go hard.
Okay, I am super excited because this is our first guest, and who better to lead us off as the first guest forever, all time on Talking Nets, Mr. Ian Eagle. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
I am honored. I had no idea. I'm the first guest out of the gate. That can never be taken away from me for eternity.
Episode 36. I would say that we were thinking about some guests, and we actually had a listener write a review and say, I love you guys. I love you too, but we need more Nets guests. We need some Nets players or somebody inside the Nets. And this was around episode, I don't know, like 20 or 25. And I was saying to Hudson, I'm like, who do these people think we are? They think we can just pull the Nets in. They think we can get KD on the pod. We pulled some strings. We figured it out. And Ian Eagle has been nice enough to join us. So, Hudson.
Hold on one second. I have KD right here. So let me get KD. We can make this into a. Yeah, there was a moment. Hudson's like,
KD was at you.
Okay.
Whoa.
Well, he was rehabbing. He's doing his rehab on the 1 year anniversary of the injury. He's doing his rehab in your house. Got it.
No, this is an Airbnb in Wyoming. This isn't even my. No, it is my house. But
that's great. Hudson, go forward with the questions. So we're going to interview Ian and just kind of keep it free flowing. Obviously, you could tell he's keeping it funny, keeping it light. So Hudson, let's not be too serious about it, but let's ask some questions so the listeners can kind of get some background, which they should know most of this stuff, but you never know who's listening.
They should know. If you don't know about Ian Eagle, I guess this is the place for you. So we're going to start off with just some basic background, right? So for those who don't know too much about you, Ian, could you tell us your connection to both Brooklyn, New Jersey, and your broadcast roots?
I was born in Miami, Florida. It was a warm day. No, I'll get into more specific. I started with the Nets in 1994. I got the radio job. I was 25 years old. I was working at WFAN radio at the time, started at FAN as an intern. Then was brought in as a producer, eventually got a chance to do updates and host talk shows. I was named the Jets pre- and post-game host in 1993. That was a big move at a fairly young age. And I was transitioning to play-by-play in my mind once an opportunity popped up. Nets job opened up. Howard David had been doing the job on radio. I saw in the newspaper that he was not going to be back. A series of events led to an interview with John Spoelstra, who's the dad of Eric Spoelstra. He was the president of the New Jersey Nets at the time, and I got the job. Miraculously, at that point in my life, I thought this could change everything. And looking back, it did. I did the radio for 1 year. Butch Beard was the head coach, Derek Coleman, Kenny Anderson, Chris Morris, Benoit Benjamin, Rick Mahorn, Jason Williams, Chris Childs, Armin Gilliam, Dwayne Shinsis. That's the vibe that was going on in 1994. And then the next year, 1995, Sports Channel decided to make a change. Spencer Ross had been doing the games on television. Terrific announcer. Howard David was an outstanding announcer, but things happened in our business. And I got an opportunity to interview for that job. I had just moved to the state of New Jersey. I was living on the Upper East Side. I was reverse commuting to New Jersey. My wife mentioned, hey, maybe we should actually move to New Jersey. I'm from Queens. I'm from Forest Hills. And at that point, the idea of New Jersey was really, in my mind, an armpit. I didn't know anything about New Jersey. I thought it was a cesspool. I had that New York mentality. So we end up moving to New Jersey, and I have an interview on Long Island at a diner in Roslyn, Long Island. And I'm telling you, I had just moved to New Jersey, so I knew very little. There was no GPS, there was no MapQuest, there was nothing, Google Maps. So I just had to, in my mind, try to figure out how long it would take me to get from where I was to Roslyn. So I ended up leaving my house for an 8 a.m. breakfast at 5:30 in the morning, and I pulled into the diner at 6:12. It didn't take very long. And I just sat in the parking lot waiting for this gentleman to show up. I didn't know what he looked like. He walked in. I assumed it might be him. I walked in. We made eye contact. He said, "Are you Ian?" I said, "Are you Pete?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You just get here?" I'm like, "Yeah, just got here an hour and 48 minutes ago." So I ended up getting the job, and that's now been 26 years, which is hard to even wrap my brain around, that I've been doing play-by-play for the Nets in some form.
That's amazing. That's truly an amazing story, and I think it's great. I think that is a diner that you're going to have to go back to sometime soon,
Yeah.
but hopefully get there at a more reasonable time.
Yeah.
Now, us at Talking Nets, we do a little bit of our research. We do some deep dives into the people that we're going to bring on. And if I learned correctly, your father is actually from Brooklyn initially.
Yeah, from Brooklyn. I went to Erasmus Hall High School, dropped out of Erasmus. He was a trumpet player and eventually a stand-up comedian and an actor, commercials, television shows, movies, but left school early to start traveling around the country in big bands. And Brooklyn was a big part of my life as a kid. My parents were off on the road a lot. They traveled a great deal. And my father would have me spend weekends with his first wife, which you would think sounds uncomfortable, but it wasn't. It wasn't uncomfortable at all. She was like a second mom to me, but she lived in Brooklyn. He was from Borough Park. She lived at 100 Caton Avenue near Prospect Park, and I would go there a lot. So Brooklyn was a big part of my youth, and it was almost fate in some way that the Nets ended up in Brooklyn from New Jersey. I must admit, once I got to New Jersey and I realized that it was a great state and had beautiful areas and a lot of pride, I was a little sad to see the Nets leave. And I was among that initial faction that didn't know if the move would work out to Brooklyn. But I can tell you now, definitively, it is working, and they continue to grow their fan base. And there's a whole generation of fans that are from New York that are adopting this team. So it's been pretty astounding to watch what this organization has become, and to have a little Brooklyn in there with my background has been a nice connection too.
Now, before we continue on to what's going on now, let's focus on your youth a little bit. You've mentioned that at a young age, you expressed interest to your parents about becoming a broadcaster. And now you have a son who has followed in your footsteps. He's only a couple years older than me, fresh out of Syracuse, just like you. Did he express that same interest at a young age?
Yeah, he at a young age thought he was going to play in the NBA. So he had illusions of grandeur that were not realistic. I didn't have the heart at the time to tell him that he was going to top off at 5'8". So I let him live that dream for a while. And I would say by 12 or 13, it started to hit him that was probably not going to be realistic. He did play high school basketball, so his abilities did translate to that level. But he started to express a real interest in the broadcasting side of things right around that age. And that's when he was serious about it. Now, he didn't do a whole lot about it. He didn't take the route of doing a show on the internet, and that's still 10 years ago, 11 years ago. It wasn't quite as prevalent. He just had a belief that he could do it. He was very strong in any kind of public speaking, any kind of performance aspect. And he felt very confident that if he put all of his passion into it, that his talent combined with his drive would lead him to the right places. He ended up at Syracuse, same school that I went to, same school my wife went to. My daughter goes there now. She'll be a senior next year. And he committed himself. And fortunately, a lot of great opportunities have popped up for him. He worked his ass off to get there, but he has done things the right way, and he's treated people the right way, which is just a simple lesson in life to begin with. And certainly now more than ever, that's as important as any other aspect of what it is you want to toss into this equation. What kind of moral fiber do you have? What kind of person are you? And I think, fortunately for him, a lot of his hard work paid off immediately. And he's got a long career in front of him, but he is having an absolute blast on the West Coast with the LA Clippers.
Well, I think there's absolutely no question as to where he got that natural talent from. Now, before I
My
throw it to
wife.
Keith,
Yeah.
oh,
from my
of
wife.
course, of course.
Yeah.
Now, I have one question for you before I throw it to Keith, and I hope this question won't preclude you from coming on to any future episodes of Talkin' Nets. But we're going to flash back to 1986, which I believe would have been your freshman year in college.
Yes.
And a movie came out that year, a movie called Iron Eagle.
Yes.
A second to Top Gun, not quite as good. And I have seen in my research that at that time your life became noticeably more difficult with the comparisons to your name.
Yes, I would say that was a turning point in my life because a lot of people at that time just assumed that I made up my name and that I used a movie as the guide. The movie was Iron Eagle, Iron, Louis Gossett, Jason Gedrick. It was a fine film. I saw it in the theaters. I thought this would be a brief little interlude in my life. Little did I know that they would make Iron Eagle 2, Iron Eagle 3, and straight to video Iron Eagle 4. They just kept churning these things out. So this thing lived on and on and on. And oftentimes, certainly when I got to college, I would say what my name was, and people thought that I was pulling their leg. I'd say, yeah, I'm Iron Eagle. They're like, Iron Eagle? No, Ian. Like Ian? I was like, yeah, but no. Because if you put a BR in front of it, what do you got? Brian. It's just like that. It's Brian, take out the BR. And then when I entered the business, people thought it was a made up name. Like how you would even make up that name, I'm not sure. And as I started meeting athletes and coaches, they thought my name was Iron Eagle. I got the Nets job. Willis Reed, the great Willis Reed, Hall of Famer, was the general manager of the Nets. And he called me Iron every time I saw him. Hey, what's up, Iron? I didn't correct him. It's Willis Reed. It's the captain. Byron Scott became the head coach. He wouldn't just call me Iron. He would say the full name. So if I saw him in the hallway before the game at the Meadowlands, he'd go, hey, what's up, Iron Eagle? Like it was one name, like I was Madonna, Iron Eagle. I get the NFL gig. My first game is a rehearsal game in 1998 with CBS. I go to Jacksonville, and the Jaguars are hosting the Dallas Cowboys. I'm working with Mark May, who was a standout with the Washington Redskins as an offensive lineman, won multiple Super Bowls, and has been a broadcaster for Turner, for CBS, longtime broadcaster with ESPN. He said, he's my partner. He says, hey, let's go down to the field before the game. I was like, yeah, why not? Go down to the field. Who's down there? Jerry Jones, owner of the Cowboys. He's walking by. He stops. He shakes Mark May's hand. Mark says, hey, I want you to meet my partner, Iron Eagle. And Jerry says, Iron? I said, actually, no, it's Iron. He said, Iron. I said, well, no, it's actually Iron. He said, Iron. So he went 3 in a row. There you go. 3 in a row. And at that point, what am I going to do? I said, yeah, you got it. It's Iron. Iron Eagle. Nice to meet you, Jay.
How about them Cowboys?
Listen, I love it. I was a freshman in college this past year, and I don't exactly think that I have the most common name out there being, Hudson. So I see you have your, like Brian without the BR. When I introduce myself to people, I am Hudson like the river.
And you have two potential first names. So that's another little
Right.
wrinkle when maybe someone says, "Hey, Flynn." You're like, "No, it's actually Hudson, not Flynn." "Hey, what's up,
Flynn,
Flynn?" Like,
Flynn
no.
Hudson.
Yeah, I
It's
get it.
it's wonderful. But I'll throw it to Keith though, just so we can keep things on track here, so we don't start talking about each other's names for the next hour.
No, that's great. You guys cracked me up with that. That was awesome. And I loved how you didn't take any credit for your son when the apple literally doesn't fall far from the tree. It fell right under the tree, made its own tree. I think that's great, but we got to give you some credit for your son. He's great. I think we actually tweeted at him from Talking Nets, and he retweeted something a while ago
Nice.
when we learned about him. And I'm just like, man, that's so awesome. I hope I can have a son that takes after me and becomes successful. And it's hard. There's a lot of people right now trying to do podcasts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people trying to create their own like YouTube shows or brand, and it's wide open for it. And you spoke about your son, not necessarily doing that, but going to school and doing it that way. And I think when I came up, people were telling me that that's the traditional way.
Yep.
I started off calling Pop Warner football games when I was 16. I played football. I was varsity quarterback. So I would play Friday nights, Saturdays, and then Sundays come back to the field and call the kids' games. And someone told me, you should get into communications. And I had no idea what they meant. A couple years go by. I realized that there's communication, radio, and television. Hudson is at Fordham. There's a long lineage of Fordham grads from Vin Scully to Michael Kay to Ryan Rucco that have come through that. I wonder if I went to Monmouth University. I don't know if there's that many people that have come through Monmouth University from the radio, but give us something from your time at Syracuse, maybe something you learned or an experience that you had at Syracuse, good or bad, because I know, getting on the radio at school can be scary at times. Give us something from your experience at Syracuse where you really knew, like, okay, this is what I want to do, or I made the right decision, or I'm glad I'm focusing on, radio here at school.
Yeah, Keith, I think you're going to have a lot of guests on. I'm not going to be the only one forever. And as you talk to other broadcasters and get their backgrounds and their stories, you'll notice that there are some common themes, of course, but then every story has its own path. And you could talk to 100 different broadcasters and literally get 100 different stories as to how they got to where they are. And that's true in every walk of life, but specifically on the broadcasting end of it. The road is really what you make of it. And I think now more than ever, there are non-traditional ways to find an audience, to get reps. Here's the reality, especially during this time, during the quarantine and the pandemic. People have created little home studios because they've had to. And we've got a camera here based on a computer and a microphone and lights, and there are ways in which you can dress it up and really do your job in a remote location like never before. Radio, same deal. Just if you have pretty good equipment, you can make it sound as if you're doing it out of a full-fledged studio. So I do think the lines have blurred more than ever before. As far as my personal background, I certainly went to Syracuse with a focus that I could do this. And because my parents, at that very young age, I was 8 years old when I told them what I wanted to do, my parents empowered me to do it. They convinced me that I could. They didn't know if an 8-year-old, I was an 8-year-old that maybe was a little bit more mature than other 8-year-olds. I led a life that was unique and different based on their jobs and the fact that I was on the road with them quite a bit. I mentioned the early years when I was in Brooklyn, but there were many years where I just traveled with them. And in fact, there was a time where they would put me on stage as part of their act, and I would perform in front of 1,000 people doing impressions, a 5-minute set, wearing a suit and a bow tie, and wowing the crowd that this 7-year-old could have the chutzpah to get out there and do his thing. So I had something in me that certainly believed that I could do it. I get to Syracuse. There's 2 radio stations at Syracuse. There's Z89 and there's WAER. WAER is the station that carries the men's basketball, football, lacrosse, and it's the one that Marv Albert worked at, Bob Costas worked at, Sean McDonough, Mike Tirico, on and on and on and on. All of these great broadcasters were there. Z89 had women's basketball, and it would do high school football, but it was a separate station, and it was a great place to really cut your teeth. The difference between the two, at Z89, you could get on the air right away. At WAER, there was a system in place that you had to follow, and that meant showing up at 5:30 in the morning for your shift, writing, not even recording a sportscast, just writing a sportscast until they deemed that your writing was at a high enough level to move on to the next step, which was recording a sportscast, not doing it on the air live, just recording the sportscast. So I went to both meetings my freshman year. The WAER meeting was intimidating. They were talking about basically, we're going to weed you out. The ones that are not truly into this probably will not make it. The Z89 meeting, they said, well, here's a piece of copy. Read this. I read it. They said, wow, you're good. You want to be on the air tomorrow? I'm like, yeah. Tomorrow? Yeah, I'm free. And that was that. So I went to Z89, WAR. I dismissed it. I said, I can do this my own way. And that's what I did freshman year. Sophomore year, I came back and I thought, well, this is just how it's going to be. I'm going to work at this one radio station. Someone at WAR did reach out to me and said, hey, we noticed that you do have a lot of talent. Do you want to come back and give it a shot? I said, well, do I have to show up at 5:30 in the morning? They said, yeah. And I said, I mean, I'd rather not, but okay, I'll do it. So I started that process and eventually it worked out. Now, the other big key, first semester, sophomore year, the first 2 weeks of school, I go out to cover a high school football game for Z89. And on the sideline is a local TV anchor. Just started the job at the CBS affiliate in Syracuse. And his name is Mike Tirico. He's from Queens. I go up, I introduce myself, we hit it off. I'm from Queens, he's from Queens, we're talking sports. He's a wonderful guy. We're just talking about life, you name it. We talk for an hour. High school football game is going on. He's got to go do some stand-ups. He says to me, hey, reach out to me if you want to be an intern at the station. I said, I would like that. I reached out to him the next day. I was an intern the day after that, and I interned for him the next 3 years, eventually became a producer for him, eventually did a radio show on a commercial station with him my senior year, started as the producer, became the co-host with him when he realized that we had legitimate banter, and he became one of my closest friends. So that would go down as a seminal moment. We didn't know that he was going to one day be the Olympics host. I knew how talented he was, and I knew how much ability he had, but that's just one of those moments that you don't predict in life, and he became a mentor and somebody that I highly respect, and someone that I still have a very close friendship today, and that was September of 1987. So right place, right time, right circumstance.
Man, so much from what you just said. Like, so that was 87.
Yeah.
You said you guys were talking sports. Mike Tirico. We have another podcast under John Boyd Media called Talking Sports, and we did a Monday Night Football draft, but not for players, but for who would be in the broadcast booth. And I selected Mike Tirico to be like, why don't they bring him back to Monday Night Football if they can't get Peyton Manning and Jason Witten didn't go so well? I said they should bring Tirico back, but man, that's crazy. I was born in 88, so that was the year before 87. And now you got me thinking, just with this current climate, right? You meet a guy like Mike Tirico in 87, young black guy. Yep. He's doing his thing in the same field as you. I don't know how exactly to ask the question, but think about 87 to now, and you've stayed friends with Mike and you've seen his success. I don't know if you've talked to him in the last couple of weeks. I don't know the last time you've talked to him, but I'm sure you have colleagues or people in the same field that are feeling some type of way with the, I guess, uneasiness the country is going through. I guess you have probably some friends and people that you've had conversations with in the past couple of weeks that are either uncomfortable conversations or
Yeah.
maybe not so much uncomfortable, but conversations you've never had. And one thing I've spoken to a lot of people about is how exceptional I've had to be playing sports, going to school, getting my education, even in competition to be on the radio. I had to be exceptional
Yep.
to get my time slot on the radio. And I never really spoke about the issues that I was told to internalize, which obviously right now this country is dealing with racism, but there's a bunch of other issues. But I was always told to keep it inside, use it as motivation. Now, when you think about a guy like Mike Tirico and what he must have faced, I guess I'm trying to get you to speak a little bit about like your journey and a Mike Tirico's journey and what you're thinking about, this climate right now and
Yeah.
how someone like you can affect change, how someone like Mike Tirico can affect change. We even have, these NBA players who are out in the streets. They're physically out in the streets
Yeah.
protesting, donating money. Just what do you think, athletes and figures like yourself in sports can do to push us forward to make sure that we don't take a step back?
Yeah, I would never speak on behalf of Mike. Obviously, he has his viewpoints, and clearly his background and his life would dictate the way he feels. I can speak from my own perspective, of course, and yeah, these can be uncomfortable conversations. Only if you allow them to be uncomfortable. If you're open, if you're a transparent person, then you can see other viewpoints. You can look at things through the prism of others. I've always tried to do that in my everyday life to begin with, but I'm hoping this is a turning point in the world. It doesn't mean that everything's going to change. It doesn't mean snap your fingers and all of a sudden all of our problems are solved. No. But what we now know is there's more of an awareness than ever before, and conversations are taking place that were not taking place. And that's really the first step. The next step is, to me, education more than anything else. Look, when I was growing up, people smoked left and right. My mom was a 2-pack a day smoker. She died of lung cancer at the age of 43. Talented woman who had many years in front of her, never got to meet my eventual wife, never got to meet her grandkids, died, age of 43. Somewhere during the next 15 years, generation, it was pounded into people's minds that smoking will kill you. And what I've seen, probably more on Hudson's age level compared to you, Keith, but what I've seen is the younger generation, they really don't smoke. Yeah, they vape and there might be other issues, but the cigarette part of it was somehow taken out of it. And that was based on education and pounding it home into people's brains that this will kill you. It's not cool. Okay, how does this equate? We have to educate people, and it has to happen at an early age. And of course, it has to start in the home. It must. But there are many racists out there. So what they're teaching in their home is not going to help us. The education has to happen in the schools, and it has to happen every single year. Not one course over your high school career, not one class when you're in college. Every year, there has to be a class. And what happened, again, not comparing the two in any which way other than to understand what the end effect might be. Smokers, in many ways, were ostracized. They were told they used to be able to smoke in a restaurant, smoke in a bar, smoke on an airplane, smoke in an office building. Now they're told, no. You have to leave. You want to do that? You must leave. You can't be here and do that. So they were ostracized. And we eventually have to get to that place where the belief system is so strong that those that aren't getting it and that aren't understanding it, they're pushed aside. And look, my hope is that sports can play a role in this because of the impact that players have, coaches have, ownership, all of that can play a major role in starting the transformation. On a personal level, the things that I can do, I can listen, I can pay attention, and I can continue to put good into the world. That's what I would tell anyone to begin with. You must put good. That's been a philosophy from day one for me. Positivity. Don't cloud our world with negatives constantly and become a positive force. And that all falls under the umbrella of understanding your fellow man and fellow woman. And I'm hoping upon hope that we're going to look back on this and say, that's when change, actual, tangible change occurred.
Well said. I might have to use that analogy with the cigarette smoking. I've never smoked a cigarette. I've also never been racist or treated anyone differently because of, their skin or their background or their religion or anything like that. So I can equate that. And yeah, positive. For a while I had like the praying hands and a lightning bolt on my profile, and it said positive energy only, because especially on the internet, there's so much negative
Oh,
energy. I'm
yeah.
always trying to like uplift, connect, and be positive with everyone. There's no point in always being negative. And we've seen a lot of people in leadership roles and in positions of power in the last couple of weeks come out and spew negativity, and that's not it. I do think we are on the way to a world where the belief system is strong enough that you won't be able to practice hate and negativity in most places. People will ask you to leave if you bring that type of energy into different establishments. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the NBA to wrap this up. Have you heard about any work that you might be getting? Are you going to be calling any of these games? Can you give us any information? Have they told you to keep any dates open or put a bug in your ear yet about Orlando or what's coming up?
Yeah, I think this is still very fluid. We're basically in phase three for the NBA. Phase one was, all right, let's get a sense of what the players think, what general managers think, what ownership thinks, and try to come up with a plan that would make sense. That was phase one, that exploratory phase. So all the rumors that you heard, they were legitimate. Those were on the table, and the NBA was weighing its options and trying to figure out the best way to move forward. Phase two was the recent announcement of a controlled environment bubble format in Orlando, and what appears to be a legitimate plan of 8 games for seeding purposes and then go into a more traditional postseason. That was phase two. We're now in phase three. And phase three is dealing with the logistical aspect of this and how do they make it work? Because there are going to be 1,000 questions, and that ranges from players, safety, coaches, how this will look, how it will sound, how it will feel, and then going all the way down to broadcasters. How do they factor in? My early impression of what's going to happen is that local broadcasters will remain in their local markets. They're not going to be able to allow every local broadcast team to come down into Orlando and be a part of it. So odds are there will be a feed provided by the NBA, and that feed will be beamed into all the local stations that do the NBA. So if you're the play-by-play voice and the analyst for the Milwaukee Bucks, you'll be in Milwaukee calling the game off a monitor. If you're the play-by-play announcer and the analyst for the Miami Heat, you'll be in Miami calling the game off a big screen. In our case with Yes, that would mean the possibility of doing it out of Stamford, Connecticut. And I know from personal experience, I've done it. I've done games. I called the 2013 NBA Finals, the World Feed, from a studio in Secaucus, New Jersey, Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs. I've done the World Basketball Championships off of a monitor in a studio. I've done tennis events. I've done golf events. So it's doable. It's very feasible. And it's probably the reality that we're looking at. Possibility that the ESPN ABC crew, maybe one crew would be allowed in to Orlando. May not be from the beginning. They may pick up in the first round or the second round of the playoffs. And the same would be said for Turner. So that's what we know as of now. Again, all of this could change and change very quickly. We must recognize that there are going to be a lot of challenges and hurdles along the way. This is not going to be just a simple, easy road. The NBA will take every precaution, but we must understand that they're dealing with a lot of what ifs from just the player health part of it and also how they're going to make this work from start to finish.
Yeah, I saw today they were asking for medical records, and there were some rumbles before about, I guess, some of the coaches or older staff members being at higher risk. So they're taking precautions and they're doing all the right things. And I know everyone's looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. How could you not be looking forward to it? The NBA, I say, is king, and I say the NBA leads, and everyone else will follow. We're not sure if we're going to get MLB back. NBA is lined up to have the number one ticket in town. The last question for you: who do you think has the best shot at winning it, and how do you think the Nets are going to do? You think the Nets can make a little bit of a run, or you think the Nets are going to be bounced early looking at the draft?
Well, let's take the first part of it first. How these circumstances play out is so incredibly interesting to me. What players are in shape? What players mentally can handle the differences that they're accustomed to? These guys are used to playing in front of 18,000, 19,000, 20,000 fans, loud, boisterous arenas with all the stimuli that can motivate them. This will not be that. This is going to be a completely different feel. So certain players are just machines. Kawhi Leonard, as an example. You put him in front of 20,000 people, or you put him in a schoolyard by himself. I think he's the same guy. How do certain guys handle that? And the mental part to me becomes such a big part of this process, and to see which teams are really well coached, because I think coaching is going to play a big, big role as well. The second part with the Nets, look, I think there was a faction of fans that were holding out hope that KD was going to come riding in and be a part of this, and Kyrie Irving was going to join him. But I think when everyone looked at all the factors involved, once they got a sense of what the schedule would look like, what the format would look like, and the fact that KD's rehab really was thrown off kilter. First of all, he did test positive for the coronavirus very early on, right after the season was suspended, but was asymptomatic and from all indications was never a true issue for him. Secondly, all of the hard work he had been doing, playing 5-on-5, going through drills, unfortunately that hit a standstill. And I think that really affected the calendar for him. That's not to say he was coming back. Maybe in the back of his mind, he thought the Olympics could be a place where he could test the waters. Who knows? We're never going to know for certain. But I think between KD and the team, there was a collective decision that this just doesn't make sense for him to push it with the Achilles injury and try to come back under the strangest of circumstances. This team was competitive right before the season was called, and there's still some really talented pieces. I'd like to see how this team performs under Jacques Vaughn in this 8-game setup leading up to a potential playoff. Karis LeVert was really showing out. That Celtic game was a classic performance by LeVert. The team played very well in LA against the Lakers. That gave them a really good taste going into this current stretch of time where they've had nothing but thoughts of what this current group could do. In addition, they have to make some big decisions down the road. Who's going to be part of this thing with Kyrie, with KD? And you've got free agents that are going to be interested in joining forces with the Nets. So a lot happening right now in the Nets landscape. And the first thing that they're going to have to deal with is just getting everybody on the same page and getting them motivated down in Orlando to put forth a good effort and at least go into what is going to be an abbreviated offseason with a better idea of who will stick when they start making some really big decisions regarding a team that they think should vie for a championship. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were signed to go out and win titles, not to be a nice New York story. So I'm curious. I want to see how all of this plays out and under this whole Orlando plan, how the Nets handled their business moving forward.
Yeah, we're curious. We're excited for it. On the beginning of this podcast, we talked even about, the one thing with free agents, and even, the Nets being able to bring in two people on the roster since we won't have KD and Kyrie. But this is a great audition for Jacques Vaughn.
Sure.
We get to see some more games with him as head coach. We get to see how his rapport is with the team. If they win some games, they shake some stuff up and surprise some people. That's another notch on his belt.
Yeah.
That gives him like a little extra credit going up against whoever else could be in this, search for the next head coach. We won't keep you too long. I know we're over our time, but thank you so much for coming on, our first guest. I enjoyed that so much. I'm hoping the listeners enjoy it. You're the man. I knew you were going to be the man. So many things you said just like connected to me, and I felt them. So thank you for coming on Talking Nets. Hopefully we can do this again, and then when the season starts and we get back to the stadium, we'll see you at the Barclays Center. And I know you don't have any like social media, right? You don't have. That's great. That's another thing I love about this guy. He doesn't need social media. He's famous and known without it. You know the voice, you know the name. So thanks again for coming on. Hudson, you got anything else?
I just want to say, thank you for coming on. Thank you for showing the Nets fans the personality, the story behind the voice of the Brooklyn Nets. I think for a lot of fans, this could be their first time hearing your backstory. And I think that's crucial because I think, now that I've heard it, I will almost hear your calls in a different way. And I really appreciate it. I hope that our talk about the Iron Eagle doesn't preclude you from coming on in the future.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
It's great stuff. And we definitely love to have you back anytime.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Hudson, that first haircut's going to be special. I know that. That's really going to hit you right here. And Keith, my pleasure. Truly great spending time with you guys. I really do appreciate the fact that there are more vehicles in which talent like you guys have can show off what your abilities are. Means a lot. I know I'm not on social media, so you can't tag me, you can't include me. It doesn't mean I don't have burner accounts. So let's just get that out of the open. I know what's happening. I'm just in the voyeur mode.
Good.
The reality behind that is when social media really hit, I had gotten to a point in my career where I was just high enough that my employers couldn't make me join. So it's a very interesting, subtle difference. My employers at that time came to me and said, "Hey, are you interested in this? You want to do this?" Instead of, "Hey, we need you to do this." That's a very big difference. And I'm telling you, I might have qualified by a year or two. It was close. And really the reason I don't do it, to be perfectly frank, I'm really fortunate that I have a bunch of different jobs with the Nets and with CBS and Westwood One and Turner and Tennis Channel. I commit a lot of time and energy to do those jobs well and to make sure I'm prepared for every broadcast and make sure that I perform at the highest possible level for each assignment. And I just knew with social media, I was not going to be able to give it my all. I was going to have to stick my toe in the pool. And I'm not a toe in the pool kind of guy. I'm a dive in or don't go in. And my choice was, I don't want to half-heartedly do this. I'm someone that I return every email, I return every text. The idea that I would just dismiss people because I didn't have the time, that would have eaten away at me. So that was the decision I made. But I get it, I understand it, and it really is a great way for me to stay in touch and follow news and know what's happening. And I'll make sure that I'm paying attention to you guys as well. Doesn't mean you're going to figure out who I am, but I'll be there.
I mean, I can appreciate it. There's a lot of broadcasters who are great broadcasters, but have gotten themselves in trouble with a
Yeah.
tweet or posting the wrong thing. We've seen that in this recent climate. So I can appreciate you deciding not to, especially where you were. And you explained, if you were going on, you wouldn't want to just be Iron Eagle Yes Network or Iron Eagle CBS. There's so many different lanes and levels to it. So I think you made the right decision. And
Thanks.
we're online, and people will catch us, and we'll make sure to put your first and last name, and I'm sure that'll be enough. You were a great guest. This was a slam dunk of a podcast. In your words, that's a man's jam.
Yes, sir. Love it. Thanks, guys, so much.
Appreciate you. Talk to
Appreciate
you
it. Thank you,
soon.
thank
All the best.